Hello, everyone. It's Tricia here, ready to deliver an expert interview for the Emergence Awakening Your Empowered Woman course. I'm so delighted today because I have the honor of speaking with a shamanic teacher who is completely aligned with the work that you're doing, connecting with your true nature. The man I'm speaking about is none other than Michael Stone. And Michael is the host of the award-winning show Conversations and the Shift Network's Shamanism Global Summit. He's the founder of Embodied Shamanism, Shape-Shifting into a Life You Love, where he teaches us to find harmony with ourselves, each other, and the web of life. You can check out his website at welloflight.com. That's welloflight.com. I'm so excited to welcome you, Michael. Thank you so much for being here today.
It's great to be with you, Tricia. Thanks for inviting me. I'm excited about your course.
Thank you. So excited to speak with you today, and I'm so excited that these women get the opportunity to hear about the work that you're doing. So important. So I'd like to start with a question that I love. How do you define empowerment? These women are working on finding the power and creative well of power inside themselves. So how do you define empowerment?
Well, let's take it apart a little bit before we define it. So you mentioned power, empowerment, and we have a tendency to think that something outside ourselves is going to give us power. Mm-hmm. So that's the first issue that I'd take notice of. The second issue is, what is power? We look at power as often as force or control. And that's very much the patriarchal model that has been in place for at least 5,000 years and the cause of a great deal of suffering. So when we're looking at power, we're looking at power with, and where do you get empowerment? Well, you mentioned earlier on when you were introducing your work about finding our true nature. Well, our true nature is nature at the heart of it. And so where to find empowerment is to return to the web of life and let go of the myth of separation. We're caught very severely in a myth that we're separate. We're separate from our bodies. We're separate from each other. We're separate from our community. We're separate from, we call nature resources, there for our use. So we have no honoring of the holiness and sacredness of the web of life of which we're a part. So from a shamanic sense, shamans always go to nature to get their power. I was in Cusco in Peru one time at a gathering of indigenous shamans, and we were supporting in getting their a fair price for their weaving. Mm-hmm. And this one person I was sitting with, and he was doing he was working with laying out this way that you honor the spirit, and he looked at me with these fierce eyes and he said, "Where's your mountain?" I was really startled by the question. This was years ago. Mm-hmm. I was really startled by the question, but immediately I knew where my mountain was. I had in fact even taken a 9-foot by 3-foot painting that I had a friend do of the mountain when I left the area. It was Mount Tamalpais in Marin County.
I love that.
And that's really something to know, that when you're out, there's an eagle flying over again. I live on the Sunshine Coast, so I'm immersed in nature, and there's all kinds of wildlife, and it really feeds me. When I forget who I am, I connect with the trees and find my rootedness, and I feel my connection to the sun and the light, and the sun is the fire that shines in my heart. It's also the center of the earth. Mm-hmm. So empowerment is really reconnecting with our true nature.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I love that.
I could go on for a half an hour about that topic, but I'm sure you have other questions.
That brings up a couple more questions for me. One is, what would you recommend for people who live in cities and don't live on beautiful Sunshine Coast where eagles are flying over? What would you recommend for people in cities?
Great question. Well, my first teacher and why I teach embodied shamanism was Gabrielle Roth, the founder of the Five Rhythms movement meditation. And Gabrielle was called the urban shaman. And she was called the urban shaman because her path was the body.
Mm-hmm.
And again, there's this separation and denial about our body, not to mention all the negative conversations we have. You know, my nose is too big, my breasts are too small, I'm over, all of this nonsense. And so this dialogue of it's a trance of unworthiness that we are constantly engaging in. And so to find your center in any urban area, you start with going to the body, and you start with going to the park. And when we enter the body, we return ourselves to the web of life because, again, we're part of nature. And so really honoring whatever arises in the body is the first place. If it's very Gestalt in that sense. It's that, you follow what's present right now in your body. And you follow and track the debilitating thoughts that you have, and you begin to notice how much your thoughts are shaping your emotions and your life. Because we live inside of a story, and we forget that we live inside of a story. And the story is, we're kind of like, I like to say we're like spear carriers in someone else's opera, when in fact who we are is the author of our own story. But we need to learn to deconstruct the story in such a way that we can reinterpret the events of our lives. You don't get rid of the events of your life, but you can certainly restory it. Mm-hmm. And so you may have been molested or raped. You may have had a tragic accident. You may have been beaten. All kinds of things could happen in your life. Yeah. But that happened in the past. And so mostly we're living our past into our future. We're recreating the things that happened to us before we were 6 or 7 years old. And we keep doing that over and over again. So to re-author your own story is to deconstruct and look and see what are the relevant patterns that I picked up early on. I'm not good enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not smart enough. I don't have enough money. I can't do it on my own. Those are a lot of the ones that women often carry. Or I have to be of service to someone. I'm a caretaker. Those are all stories. And you can, once you see the stories, you can look to where they came from and then reinterpret the events in a heroine or a hero's journey in such a way that you empower yourself. So, it takes practice and it takes time to do that, but you're not stuck in your story. Your story forms your identity. It's when you say I, your story is who you're talking about. And it appears that that's a fixed story, but it's not. It's very malleable, and it always has been. But you have to realize, first of all, you're no more your story than you're your hand. I have a hand, but I'm not my hand. Mm-hmm. I have emotions, but I'm not my emotions. Mm-hmm. I have thoughts, but I'm not my thoughts. Yeah. And you're not your story. You're the author of the story. And as soon as we can step out of being a victim of our story and into being the author of our story, we, again, to go back to empowerment, we empower ourselves. Empowerment doesn't come from outside of ourselves.
Mm-hmm. So true. You mentioned two of the huge key practices that I teach in Emergence, which is looking at the old stories that are dictating who you believe you think you are and rewriting those, and then going back into the body and really paying attention to what the body is telling you about what it needs, about what you need, about what your destiny is. So yeah. I love that.
Such important work you're doing, Tricia. Really important work.
So one of the things I've read in your work is how, as a human race, we've become disconnected from nature, which is what you've been speaking about. How has this particularly affected women?
Well, let me say a couple things about that. I could, again, go on for a long time about that. First of all, in the last 5,000 years of the patriarch, women have taken incredible abuse culturally. They've been burned at the stake. There's been genocide. There's been mutilation. So there's a great deal of fear around speaking your truth.
Yeah.
And but if you look to shamanism, which is the world's oldest spiritual practice, goes back perhaps 100,000 years. Women have always been the ones that are the closest to nature. They were the herb gatherers. They were the mothers and the birth. They were caretakers, but they were caretakers in the sense of they were responsible for the earth, and they were considered equal in Druid societies. It's the same thing in your Celtic societies. There was an equality that's there. But the equality isn't something that's given by men. We have a lot of women that are railing against men. Men are just a bunch of bozos running around, also in their own story, not knowing any different. There's the issues of greed and false power and bullying. All those things are, but women need to set their boundaries and be clear that they are part of nature. And they're closer to nature because of the menstrual cycles and the rhythms of life and the babies and all the things that make them more connected. They've always been the earth connection. We call it Mother Earth for a reason, And so I think it's really important for women to, again, I keep saying this, go back to nature and the natural systems. Pay attention to the seasons and the cycles and honor them. Honor the elements. The earth gives us a place to stand and something to stand for. The sun reminds us that there's always a sun in our heart and that it's at the center of the earth. The water teaches us to be fluid and flexible. And the air is what connects us with all life. So to honor the elements, to honor the directions, to honor the seasons, and to hold everything in nature as sacred and holy is the path back from this supposed false fall from grace, which has been, the whole myth of sin was created as a way the church can control not just women, but everyone. And this original sin. There's no original sin. We need to get back to the garden and have some fun.
So it sounds like what you're saying is because women are more connected to nature because of the cycles of life, they're feeling that separation even more. And to demonize men is not, that's just another story.
Absolutely. And because of that connection with the earth is why the Dalai Lama said that Western women are going to be the ones to save the world if it happens.
Yes.
We're in the 6th mass extinction, and a lot of women are out there doing great work, but a lot of them are against rather than for, number one, and a lot of them are rallying against a phantom, which is men. And, what there really is to do is to honor the divine feminine archetype. There's a whole archetype in that when we think of the divine feminine, we think of going to the intuition, to the water within. We go to the cellular instinct. We go to compassion, having passion with, not passion over. To the creativity, the empathy, the idea of collaboration and holistic kind of thinking. And so these are the essential feminine qualities that you find by reconnecting with the tree of life, with nature herself. Nature herself. Get it?
Nature herself, yes, I get it. Okay, so for everybody listening, just let this moment be the marker where you just stop and really notice your breath and just really look outside the window and whatever you see, the sun, the sky, the trees, birds, just really, really make this moment be a marker where you start to connect with nature. Because connecting with nature, according to what Michael's saying, is going to connect you to yourself. So that's really beautiful. I love
And
that.
it can happen in the city too. If you're in a crisis or in pain or in stress and, overwhelm. And overwhelm and stress are just, they're an opportunity to recognize that your level of identity is insufficient to meet the current challenges and experiences that you're having. In other words, it's a story,
yes,
but it's a story that's a portal for your own growth and expansion.
Yes, and that's what this is all about.
Yeah, exactly.
This is all about.
We're evolving. Funny thing.
You talk about, speaking of evolving, you talk about evolutionary wisdom in the body.
Yeah.
Could you talk about how to pull personal power in this way?
Evolution and pull personal power. Well, it isn't personal anymore if you're pulling evolutionary power, first of all. It's ancestral.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a great question. We don't honor our ancestors. I for many years claimed myself to be the black sheep of my family and basically had no family and then cut off the history. But we have, from a spiritual sense, we have helping ancestors that are in non-ordinary reality. Now that for some people is hard to swallow, but if you look at it from a sense of DNA, we've got 37 and a half trillion cells in our body. Each cell contains huge maps, libraries full of our ancestors' experiences. We wouldn't eat and we wouldn't be alive if they hadn't have learned how to survive in the world, if they hadn't had connected, if they hadn't have been tribal. All of what we have today came from our ancestors. They're literally having, the masculine and feminine has their hand on our shoulder back many generations, and it all ends up at the same place, that we're all one. So in terms of evolutionary sense, we are healing the issues that our ancestors didn't deal with going through this time of crisis. Mm-hmm. What's amazing about that, from my cosmology that I work in, when we get the courage to heal these past wounds through forgiveness and recognition and many other ways, when we build the courage to do that, we not only heal our ancestral line, we heal our descendant line. So the descendants no longer have to do that thing that we did over and over and over. Get raped, get robbed, get bullied, get whatever that story that is that got us here. Each of these things that we consider negative events, challenges, breakdowns, they're all portals to the divine and to healing. Every single thing that we think is a problem is really a doorway to walk through. And again, it takes courage. Where does courage come from? Courage comes from the heart. It's the French word, and the Latin word means the heart. We drop the longest distance. Who was it? Somebody said the longest distance is the distance from the head to the heart, from the mind to the heart. So, but I believe that women are innately more capable of doing that than men. And I'm a man saying that.
Yeah, why is that? Why do you say that?
Well, because of the things I've said before about being more embodied and more in touch with the wisdom of the earth, and I would say because of the pain and suffering of the history, that if you look, the people who are healers are almost always the wounded healers. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the feminine wound is great. So is the masculine, but the feminine wound is very directly related to the desecration of nature in our ecosystems.
Mm-hmm. So I love what you said, though. I love about how everything we have gone through, everything our ancestors went through that we carry with us, the traumas, the stresses, these are only preparing us to be who we are today. These end up being the gifts that we have to offer. They form who we are. They're only negative because of the stories that we create about them.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that.
And it's so cool that then it goes on to descendants. And you know this intuitively, that, the way that you are being, emphasis on being, with your children is going to be passed on to future generations. I mean, it's just kind of obvious, except that we don't think of it on a day-to-day basis, that every action, every thought, every word that I have, and that doesn't mean you have to, close down, it means you have to pay attention, is affecting my children and future generations.
Mm-hmm. Which is why I feel it's so important for women to do the work that you and I are teaching, because it's going to change how they are with their daughters, which is going to change future generations. And that is what I believe the Dalai Lama was talking about when he said the Western woman will change the world, because we will need to change it for our daughters and for their daughters.
By the way, be careful of going into, I failed, my daughters or sons are already grown up. It's never too late.
That's another story too. Right?
That's another story, exactly, the point, yeah.
I love it. I love that. Okay, so when you talk about living a shamanic way of life, what does that mean?
Yeah. Well, there's a Native American saying, "May you walk in beauty." And for me, that is the essence of it. May I walk in beauty. Well, to walk in beauty, you pay attention to your thoughts and you focus on positive, beautiful thoughts. To walk in beauty is to notice and be present to the amazing beauty that's surrounding you, that's emanating from the earth, the earth, the sunsets, the tides that go in and out, the moon, the stars. To live a shamanic way of life is to live in awe. To live in a place where gratitude is the most conversations you have are ones of gratitude. Oh my God, I turned the light on and light came. That's a miracle. Water comes out of the faucet. It's a miracle. Plants grow up on the ground and nourish me. That's a miracle. It's, life is miraculous. And if we don't start recognizing that, we won't be around to enjoy it.
Right. So for everyone listening, just stop for a moment and just look around and see even one thing that you feel grateful for, because the gratitude is what Michael's talking about walking in beauty. That's the beginning of living a shamanic way of life. Yeah, that's really beautiful. I love that. How does this play out in your life? Like, what could you tell our listeners just kind of what your life looks like living a shamanic? I know you live in the Sunshine Coast and you're surrounded by nature, but could you tell us a little bit about your kind of day-to-day shamanic life? How does it look?
Well, it's a process, it's really, it's trying to listen more and more closely to the quietest voices that I can hear, which is spirit speaking. So trying to find places to be still and silent is one of the key things in practicing that. I also, besides meditating, spend time staring at the wall, because meditating helps me to work on the inward things that are going on. Staring at the wall helps me to be out there. And so can I be in here and out there at the same time? So, it gives us depth and breadth to our life when we become, what I'm talking about is being more present, really. Yeah. And everything emanates from a state of presence. So, I'm terrible at it too. I mean, I've, constantly, I don't mean to put myself on a pedestal, because everything I've learned is because I'm the worst at everything, not the best. in terms of meditation. I was a terrible meditator. That's why I started dancing, because I couldn't sit still long enough, smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee, in my early days. And, dancing is the only thing that could get me grounded at the time. And, I grew up in a very, I was born between two atomic bombs to a military family. I grew up in the military and saw war and death and all those kinds of things. So, all of those woundings, again, are the things that constantly come up. You think you're going to get rid of those wounds. All you can do is keep reinterpreting the story. And one of the things that's an issue for people is they think they're going to get rid of something. And the very act of repressing and suppressing those thoughts and ways of being that come up, actually, that resistance causes its persistence. That whole idea of change. Why would you change something that wasn't? You only change something that is. And if it is, then it's only in the present. Mm-hmm. So that whole act of trying to change reinforces the very thing you're trying to change. So can you be with whatever arises? Mm-hmm. And you hold it in your heart? Can you hold that trance of unworthiness and all those negative stories you say in your heart and say, oh, this is a story I'm carrying, I don't want to pass this on to future generations, but so I know I need to love my story, but I can't love my story right now, but can I love not loving my story right now? You know what I'm saying?
Yes, accepting whatever arises.
So you can just be with it as it is, and that is, to me, the essence of living a shamanic life. Mm-hmm. And also to have fun and laugh, you don't serve anyone by being filled with sorrow and remorse and regret and negativity. Mm-hmm. Some people think, well, because the world's a mess, I should be negative. Well, that just adds more negativity to the world. Mm-hmm. Why? Mm-hmm. You look at someone like the Dalai Lama you mentioned, or Desmond Tutu, I adore. People like that, they're laughing all the time. They're having a good time. Mm-hmm. In spite, what was it Joseph Campbell said? Can we be joyful in the face of the sorrows of the world?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great question.
It's like what you were saying, where we focus our attention and where we put our awareness is what grows. Yes. And we talk on Emergence a lot about going inside and just allowing whatever arises, feeling whatever fear arises or whatever discomfort arises, and really listening to the body's sensations as wisdom. Like, I believe that the sensations in the body is information trying to come through. And so really getting still and really allowing whatever arises, just accepting that. Such a huge, huge, important piece. Recently I was reading an article by Thich Nhat Hanh, who was talking about how we can actually reverse trauma and stress going back into the past, into our ancestors, by allowing them to just be and feeling the pain of them.
Yeah. But that's what I was saying before. Exactly that. And I love Tay. I spent time in Plum Village with him, and he's someone who's always laughing and having fun.
Yeah.
And it's a very meditative life. It's a funny story in Plum Village. I don't know if I want to tell you the story. Let's see if I can condense it. So I was supposed to go skiing, and then that fell through, and I was already ticketed to go to France, to the Dolomites. And so I decided to go spend time with him in the winter. This was years ago when he was just starting it. And I kept calling to check on my reservations, and no one ever answered the phone. So finally one day I was on the phone and I let it ring. I just had the phone just ringing and ringing and ringing, and I just figured I'll just let it ring until something happens. They don't even have a machine or anything. And so finally someone picks up the phone. Mm-hmm. And I said, hello? And someone says, hello? And I said, well, this is Michael Stone, and I'm coming, and I need a ride, and is my reservation, and they said, oh, yes. I said, okay, then I'll be there, like that. So I hang up the phone. I went, that was so weird. So I get there, and I realize that there's a practice, that they do. And we need to develop our own practices, daily practices. So again, going back to your last question, it's important to have practices, whatever they are. I journey to find new practices. That's a way of retrieving shamanic information. But so I get to Plum Village, and I go there, and I go to dinner, and I realize that every time a bell rings, they have a practice of stopping and taking 3 breaths.
Yep.
So every time the phone rings, they stop, and it takes them 10 minutes to get across the room to answer the phone. So, and even when you're doing walking meditation with Tay out in the yard, there's church bells everywhere. It's France, there's church bells going off. So every time there's a church bell, this whole group would stop and go.
That sounds like a good time to ring a bell and take a breath, don't you think? Shall we do it? Here we go. Ready?
Yeah. It's so nourishing. It's so nourishing. It's like, you want a good meal, just take a breath.
Yeah, isn't that beautiful?
Get fed by the trees.
It's such a simple next step, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just such a simple next step.
Yeah.
Just ring a bell and take a breath. That's so beautiful. Thank you. I love that. What a great story. What a great story. So I guess the question I have to ask our listeners is, what are you waiting for? There's, this life belongs to you. So, I want you to just, when you finish listening to this, just think about, what is your next step? Is it ringing a bell and taking a breath? Is it stopping and looking at the wall and just feeling what you're feeling in your body? Is it walking out and hugging a tree? Just what is your most simple next step? We call that, in emergence, we call it turtle steps. It's the slowest, smallest step that you can take that's doable right now. Yeah, I love that. So you were talking about your journey. And I love that you talked about your journey, because you were talking about, even when you started your spiritual path, how challenging life was for you. And, and you started with one step, which was starting to dance and just starting to feel your body. So how did you get from, what you went through in your life to finding the courage to begin using your voice the way you have been and really helping people the way you have been?
Tricia, I have no idea. I have no idea. But I will say something about this frenzy to find our life purpose.
Yeah.
We have this idea, and there's so many courses to take and so many things to do to find your true purpose, to find your divine purpose. And I've been, talked about that and worked with that for years myself. And finally realizing that my divine purpose is each step of the way. It's not a destination to get to. It's a way to be moment to moment. Mm-hmm. And so whatever we're doing is our divine purpose. And if you're not doing what is really calling to you and what that still voice is saying, well, stop it. Mm-hmm. Did you ever see that Bob Newhart psychology thing?
Oh, I love that. Yes, I love that.
Just stop it. Stop it. Well, that's pretty great spiritual advice. If what you're doing isn't working, stop it and do something else. You want to know If you want to know how your life got to be the way it is, just listen to what comes out of your mouth. Because the world we live in is the one we speak and think into existence.
Mm-hmm.
That's the bottom line. So the more you remember that, the more you have the tools and the power, and know that, people act as if they're not whole and complete. We're already whole and complete. There's nowhere to get to. This is it. This is really it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Your nose isn't going to get any smaller, and your breasts aren't going to get any bigger, baby. This is it. So you might as well love it.
Yeah, it's just really about increasing consciousness in each moment.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. So, yeah, I mean, even with each breath, it's just, if that's a way of raising consciousness, if what you're focusing your attention on is increasing that, and what you're saying is adding to the negativity, then stopping and just taking a breath, feeling into your body, connecting with nature in each moment.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the things I teach in my work, is the pause.
Mm-hmm.
When you're in the middle of something, take a pause. Just stop. Breath.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so important in our frenzied.
And like you were saying, go to the body. That's really the first place to go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So many women that are in this course are in a huge transition in their life. Something has ended, a relationship, or the loss of a loved one, or a career transition, and so they're really processing and ending. What advice would you have for them as they're in this middle, in between place of something ending and something yet to begin?
Well, that's the nature of all things: beginning, middles, and endings.
Mm-hmm.
It's a cycle. And when you know that, if you're in the middle of something, there's going to be an ending and there's going to be another beginning. Mm-hmm. So it's really the question of, how will I bring, our friend Linda calls it honorable closure. How will I have honorable closure to this, what is happening to me now, a divorce, or children leaving home, or, whatever the issue is. How am I going to have an honorable, successful ending to this, which not only empowers me, but empowers all the people around me because of the way I deal with it? And that has to do with being authentic and real, and not trying to stuff it and hide it. And then that leads to a new beginning. How shall I start this? Do I start with honoring my word as myself, my integrity? What is integrous for me? What is whole and complete for me in starting that? And then you are back in the middle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we talk about the cycle of life, and how we're constantly in that wheel of change, where something's ending, and then you're dreaming up what's going to come next, and then you're starting to manifest it, and then you're living it, and then you're back to an ending, and it's just this constant cycle of life. But you were talking about integrity, and I love that, because a lot, from my perspective, empowerment is a lot about being in integrity with yourself.
Yeah.
And you said earlier in this conversation about not getting power externally, getting power within, and a lot of that comes from integrity. When you talk about integrity with yourself, what tools? Do you have any tools to offer for women who are in this time of transition? Absolutely.
Well, first of all, let me tell you where my take on integrity comes from Werner Erhard, who, in spite of stories about him and things, is probably one of the great thinkers on the planet, and has been for a long time. And so he actually has a scientific paper that's out. It's very long and it's very academic. The bottom line of it is that he separates integrity from ethics and morality. So integrity is not about good or bad, or right or wrong. That's the first thing to know about integrity. Mm-hmm. Integrity in the model, not that it's true, but in the model that Werner created, is based on honoring our word as ourself. Mm-hmm. People say that talk is cheap, but it's not true. we cheapen talk. My one of my teachers, Sandra Ingerman, who I love and adore, also my good friend, reminds us of the old saying, abracadabra.
Yeah.
You know that saying?
Yep.
Well, that's actually an ancient Aramaic saying, arakadhabra, and what that means is, I create as I speak. So we as children had this power, and we were going around like magic, abracadabra, saying abracadabra, when in fact, we were playing with some really powerful medicine there. So to honor your word as yourself is really the bottom line of integrity. And if you're up to big things in life, which many of us are, then you're going to not always keep your word, your promises. And so the aspect of that from an integrist point of view is that as soon as you know that you're not going to do it, then you remake your promises and commitments. And so you can regain your integrity by cleaning up all the areas where it's out. Now, once you actually take that on, is that eagle again? Once you actually take that on, you will find that your integrity is out everywhere.
And would you say that to really know if you're in integrity is to really, again, check into the body and just...
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Particularly the throat, the heart, and the solar plexus area is a great way physically to look at what's true and what's not true. And when you start to pay attention to that area of your body, you'll find that if it's true, I see it like a sea anemone, it opens up. And when it's not true, it closes down. You also can see it as energy, going down or going up. But it's, the body doesn't lie. It's immediate.
Yeah, it really doesn't.
Its actions are always true.
And this goes back to the awareness piece. So when we're using our words, which are very powerful, like you've just said, really checking in to how it feels here, how it feels in the throat, how it feels in the heart, to see if what you're saying is actually in integrity with your true nature.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And
that's what your true nature is. It's not something outside yourself. It's what's happening right now.
Yeah. So many great things that you've mentioned. So if you were going to recommend one next step as a homework assignment for our listeners, one next step as a homework assignment for them to begin to use a shamanic way of life to reconnect with themselves, with each other, and with the web of life, what would be that one piece that you would recommend?
Sure. Stop complaining. Take it on as a practice to not complain about anything. Try it for 24 hours. Just see how that works. That will get you in touch with the disempowering conversations that you live inside of. Just stop complaining. Don't let it leave your lips. Notice when you have the complaining thoughts. Keep a log of it. You'll begin to see the disempowering conversations that are shaping your life. Why you're not living a life you love is because of the disempowering conversations that you traffic in about yourself and others.
Yeah, that's so great. Because the complaining is you wanting to validate the story that's limiting you or blocking you. Right?
To validate it, there's a lot of reasons that people complain. A lot of it has to do with belonging. Oh, I'm so busy. Oh, I'm so busy too. You wouldn't believe we got like one up on our complaints. You wouldn't believe what happened to me. And so it has a lot to do with belonging, but it keeps us stuck. There's no potential for growth when you live in a world of complaints.
Yeah. Yeah, so again, that awareness in the moment of noticing the power of what you're saying and noticing where you're putting your awareness, pausing, and instead of complaining, noticing around you the beauty in that moment, whatever that beauty is. So, awesome advice. Is there anything else you want to make sure that our listeners hear about your work and about?
No, just that I love you, Tricia, and I'm so excited about your work and what you're doing to empower women, and it's really great. And I know you have a course coming up, and what are the dates and times of your course coming? When does it start?
The course, the start date for the course is October 26th. It's a 7-week online course, which is just, yeah, it's really important work about questioning the stories, going back into the body, listening to intuition, trusting the wise self, and then actually going in and accessing your unique gifts, the gifts you came into this life to give.
Yeah.
And taking one small turtle step towards using your voice and using your gifts in the world. So love it. And tell us about your course, Michael, because you have a course coming up as well.
The course that I'll be doing is about what I call shape-shifting. People think that's some kind of magical thing, but it's really about energy, and it's about learning to use your power to shapeshift your energy into living a life you love. And that starts in November 2nd. So thanks so much for asking. It's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, it's been such a treat hearing about your wisdom and just your beautiful, radiant light. I just love it. I love your energy, Michael. It's been such a pleasure and such important information for our listeners to hear. And it's so great to collaborate with you. So go to Michael's website, welloflight.com, and you'll be able to have access to all of his teachings and his course and all kinds of great things he's doing in the world to help make this world a better place. So,
and get the newsletter. Sign up for the newsletter. It comes out every month, and it's, hopefully got some good stuff. I've been doing it for years, and you can find out when my radio show is and other offerings that we have. So
wonderful. Yes. Yeah. Do it. Go to welloflight.com.
Thank you. So blessings, dear one.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Be well.
Thank you. You too.